What is up, Bat Family? Welcome to Batman Theory, where we take a deep dive into comic books, movies, cartoons, and everything in between that has to do with the Dark Knight. Guys, in today's episode, I have a really special one for you. I'm going to be doing the top 10 episodes in Batman the Animated Series. Batman the Animated Series, for me, is my all-time favorite TV show. I think it is almost flawless. Honestly, if it wasn't for towards the end when they switched over to the new Batman Adventures and really changed up the animation style and the way characters looked, I think that really tainted the show just a little bit. But overall, there is no denying that Batman the Animated Series molded my childhood and many, many others. Between the animation, the writing, the action, everything on that show, there wasn't a single episode that I don't like. And that's very rare for me to say as a show. Out of 85 original episodes, I don't have one that I absolutely dislike. There are some that are very much weaker than others, and making the top 10 was really hard. It's honestly like, it's really hard of me to really pick 10, and I'm going to leave a few out. I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm leaving a few out that are going to probably ruffle some feathers. Some people won't agree with me, and that's okay. If you have your own personal top 10 or even your own personal top 5, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see what everyone thinks. So without further ado, let's get right to it.
And here we go.
Number 10, Trial. So guys, I personally really enjoy this episode. I don't think it's in the top 3 or top 5 like a lot of people I've seen on YouTube or online really put it. They really put it on this pedestal. I think it's a great episode, and it explains that, you know, why Batman's villains weren't created by Batman, and in fact would be villains nonetheless. It's just they are, you know, in some way, shape, or form, and honestly, if it wasn't for Batman, they'd be running amok. And I think Trial handles the episode really well. I think it's got some flaws still, which is why it's not higher in my list. I think it is very rushed, and I almost think it really deserved, in my opinion, to be a 2-part episode. I think it really could have benefited. It's one of the episodes I really think that could have benefited from really being stretched out more and fleshed out more. Number 9, Almost Got Him. Now, this is one of the crowning achievements by Paul Dini. He's written a lot of them, and guys, I'm going to put it right now, spoiler alert, I don't have Heart of Ice on my top 10. Before you bring out your pitchforks, I'm going to let you know why. So I love Heart of Ice, and one of the reasons it's not in my top 10 is because, quite frankly, I think it's a great episode, but I just don't find myself watching it as much. If I'm binging the show, I tend to just not watch it as much for some reason as some of the other ones. And it's not because I think it's a bad episode, or even boring for that matter. I think it's one of the most flawless episodes. It's more of, there's just other ones that I'm more drawn to story-wise. But anyway, number 9 is Almost Got Him. So Almost Got Him tells the story of several villains, you know, Poison Ivy, Penguin, Two-Face, Killer Croc, and Joker, all talking about and telling their own stories of how they almost got the Batman. With a lot of fun twists all along the way, and at the end, another fun twist at the end. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it. I definitely recommend watching it. But it's a great episode. The animation is once again flawless, and one of the reasons, guys, all these episodes have just phenomenal animation in certain parts. So definitely would recommend. But I think it's a great episode, but I do think there's others that just tell a more compelling Batman story. Number 8, Paging the Crime Doctor. Now, this is one I don't think I've ever seen at anyone else's top 10 ever. But I'm going to be honest with you, I found myself as an adult watching this more. In the last 4 or 5 times I've watched the show, I've really been drawn to this episode. One, because it introduces us to a character that we haven't seen before, and to a part of Gotham we haven't seen before. It introduces us to Rupert Thorne's brother. Now, he was a famous up-and-coming surgeon, and because he had to do some favors for Rupert in the past, he's now performing medical operations for Rupert in his operations as a crime lord. So Rupert's brother is no longer on the medical board. He's no longer licensed in the United States. So he operates underground in this mob boss hospital. And this really takes us to a darker part of Gotham City that doesn't have to do with one of Batman's major rogues gallery. This is Rupert Thorne. He's obviously a big time mob boss. And I think the story itself is a really good one. And I gotta be honest, guys, at the end of the episode, when Bruce agrees to help out Matthew Thorne into getting his license back, Matthew was originally hesitant and thinks that he's going to be just taken advantage of again. And all Bruce wants is one thing. He wants him to tell Bruce more about what his father was like when he was younger. And having Kevin Conroy in the most sincere voice ever say, "What was my father like?" just gives me chills every single time. Number 7, Robin's Reckoning, Part 1 and 2. So now I have, on a few of these, I'm only going to include Part 1 because I do think Part 2, a lot of times in Batman the Animated Series, tend to drop off a little bit. But Robin's Reckoning is one of the few that really does stand up in Part 1 and Part 2. I think it's a lot of fun, and I really think it gives a good context to Robin's origin. And when I think of Robin in this, and when I think of Robin in general, I tend to think of Robin from Batman the Animated Series. I think of Robin as, a late teens, early 20s, college-age kid. I think he's a man. He's not really a boy wonder anymore. And I think it's honestly a little more compelling and probably a little less weird that way, in my opinion. Robin's Reckoning really tackles the issues of familial loss, and Bruce and Dick, that's something that they can both bond over. And at the end, when Robin tries telling Batman that he doesn't understand, he kind of snaps out of it after he realizes he does. He's the only person in the world that really understands what Dick's going through. And it's really just a good episode about revenge and dealing with your past demons. And I think it's really, intriguing that way, and definitely always on a lot of people's top 10, and most certainly is on mine. Number 6, Two-Face Part 1. So the reason I think Two-Face Part 1 versus Part 1 and 2 is because Two-Face Part 2 tends to dip off. It takes place months after Part 1, and it really is an entirely different story in my opinion. I think this really could have been a two-parter that dealt all within the first section. I think Two-Face Part 1 is a nearly flawless episode. I do think it detracts a few times because they try to almost stretch it out into two parts, but Two-Face Part 1 not only does it have a brilliant animation and brilliant storytelling, it's very tragic. And honestly, the one thing I really like about Batman the Animated Series with Two-Face is that they took their time and had 7 or 8 episodes before Harvey Dent became Two-Face. We met Harvey and Bruce as friends, and they hung out together. They went on dates together. They hung out at fundraisers and parties together, and they were genuinely good friends. So seeing Harvey turn into this monstrous Two-Face truly is sad. And when you find out at the end how they do it here versus the courtroom acid like you see on most iterations, having it done the way it was done is very tragic because Batman thinks he could have been there in time, and that's what really is eating away at Bruce this entire time. The episode delves into Bruce not being able to save his parents, and then also not being able to save Harvey. And it just makes for a really good episode. Harvey loses everything he knows. He just wins re-election for DA, and then just as quick as he wins it, he loses it again through blackmail with Ripper Thorne. I love the story of duality and how Harvey really has to battle his demons in this one, and unfortunately, the sad thing about this story is there's not a good resolution. This ends on a really sad note, and truthfully, Part 2 really kind of does too, but Part 1 especially, it ends on a sad note, and I just feel like there's really not a great resolution, and it's one of the few episodes that doesn't end on a high note. Number 5, House and Garden. Now, a lot of people would be saying, what the heck is this episode on here for? And I gotta be honest, guys, I didn't know at first why. I actually had, as number 10 originally, before I went through all the episodes, I actually had another one of Poison Ivy's episodes on there, Eternal Youth. And the reason is, Eternal Youth and House and Garden were the first 2 episodes I ever saw of Batman the Animated Series back to back. I was 6 years old, and I gotta be honest, Eternal Youth with the people being sprayed and turned slowly into trees really scared me, but I gotta be honest, the entire plot, I don't know why, but House and Garden gets me every time. I think it's part of, it's unfair because part of it's probably past childhood trauma, but seeing that child come out of the plant at the end, I don't want to spoil the entire thing, but it is creepy, the imagery is terrifying, and the whole idea, guys, is Pamela Isley, Poison Ivy, is reformed. She's gotten married, she's taken on a husband and 2 kids, and she's trying to turn her life around. Batman is the only person who doesn't believe it, and at the end it is for a wicked, wicked ride. Definitely one I would recommend, and honestly, I just can't get that mental image out of my head. It just gives me shivers down my spine. Number 4, Feet of Clay. So Feet of Clay is one of the few Batman episodes that I really think that's a 1 and 2-parter, really deserves to have 1 and 2 part and doesn't drop off at all, in my opinion. And if anything, gets better as the episode gets on and Part 2 goes in, because it deals with a lot of things. It deals with loss, it deals with how your life changes, it deals with struggling of addiction, There's so many things going on here in this episode, and I gotta be honest, Clayface is one of my favorite villains if he's done right, and I think it's partly because of Batman the Animated Series. I think Clayface was handled extremely well. You have Ron Perlman voicing Clayface, and I think the entire story of Matthew Hagen as a washed-up actor who redeems himself after a car accident and takes this prototype face cream that ends up making him addicted, gets in debt with Roland Daggett over it. And it's really a terrifying thing to see a few things in this episode. You see Matthew Hagen losing his humanity. At one point he comments how he's not even a man anymore when he turns into Clayface. And it truly is a very sad scene. You see a few parts where Clayface, when he's discovering his powers, he takes Batman and literally puts him inside his body. Just a really scary imagery here going on. The entire episode 1 and 2, the arc is phenomenal, and it ends on a nice, really creepy note where Clayface is going to be back, and it honestly just leaves you unsettled when you watch it. Very, very phenomenal episode. Number 3, It's Never Too Late. And again, I don't think this one is very often on a list of anyone's. And one of the reasons I think I like it so much is, aside from the beautiful imagery, the dream sequences that are more of a flashback, I should say, are just gorgeously animated. But the story itself really dives deep very early on in Batman the Animated Series. They dive deep into not a big character in the grand scheme of Batman. You deal with Rupert Thorne and Arnold Stromwell. Arnold Stromwell is a crime lord, and him and Rupert Thorne are having a mob war. And Stromwell's older, he's been around a long time, and he's made a lot of mistakes in his life. One of them is he deals with drugs, he manufactures them, he deals them, and on the side, because of that, his son has become addicted to drugs. And it has a nice tie-in with a pastor who ends up being Arnold Stromwell's childhood friend. And guys, I gotta be honest, the entire episode from start to finish is just one of the best. Very, very gripping. And honestly, it's kind of sad too to see a children's show, especially in the early 90s, deal with drugs and drug addiction is something you don't see every day, and honestly is an eye-opener. The episode does a great job dealing with guilt, dealing with aging, and learning from the past and learning to let go and become someone better. Number 2. Now this was a tough one, guys. It was between 1 and 2. I wasn't sure which way I was going to do it, and I decided I'm going to put number 2 at Heart of Steel, part 1 and 2. Heart of Steel is, again, a very underrated one that some people have in the top 10. A lot of people have at least in the top 20. I gotta be honest, this is the one episode I look forward to, or I should say episodes, part 1 and 2, are probably the two I most look forward to watching over and over again. I absolutely love the storyline in this, dealing with software, dealing with AI and computers, but also it deals with grief and loss of family, and you have a really big mystery going on through the entire thing with parts 1 and 2. Essentially, an old friend of Bruce Wayne's named Carl Rossum, an expert in robotics, has created this new software called HARDAC. HARDAC is self-learning, and he did it in a way to make AI that could hopefully eventually replace his daughter who he lost in a vehicle accident years ago. HARDAC unfortunately becomes too self-aware and wants to replace humanity with robots. Now, on the surface, this sounds kind of like a corny 2-part episode, but I gotta be honest, it's one of my favorites, and I think it really, really is underrated. Definitely watch it for a really great time. Number 1, A Perchance to Dream. Now, if this was any surprise to anyone, guys, this is almost everyone's unanimous top, at least top 2 or 3, but this is almost everyone's number 1. Kevin Conroy, Batman himself, has said that Perchance to Dream is by far his number 1 favorite episode. And guys, why can't it be? I mean, this is what everyone always wonders. What if Bruce Wayne wasn't Batman? What if his parents were still alive? There's a lot of what ifs here. What would Gotham be like? And we get to kind of see that in A Perchance to Dream. Again, I really wish this was one of the episodes they took and did a 2-parter with. I think it really deserved it. But ultimately, we didn't get that. However, I think Perchance to Dream is for sure one of the mainstays and has a really great surprise ending. And at the end, you really can tell when Batman finds out everything's going on and that it's all a dream. He's genuinely upset, and you can tell he's not even necessarily mad at the Mad Hatter. He really is just sad. And it really is a really sad episode that doesn't end very happily either. So definitely the best episode of all. Take a look, guys. You won't regret it. So there you have it, guys. That is my top 10 Batman the Animated Series episodes. I hope you really enjoyed it, guys. Stay tuned. I will do a top 10 worst Batman the Animated Series episode, because I think that's kind of fun to go through too. It's hard, actually might be even harder, because there's just so many I like and there's very few I really dislike, but stay tuned anyway. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a great day.